is how good are the lawyers at expressing these ideas? Most often, not very good, to be honest with you. There are law firms today that are hiring and training special counsel specifically to deal with electronic discovery issues. And that is a growing need for the AmLaw law firms, right, the top law firms. A lot of the firms that we deal with here in New York City on 6th Avenue or on the 3rd Avenue, Lexington Avenue corridor have special counsel that deal and advise their clients specifically to these issues. And they work with folks like us to kind of turn the wrench to employ the techniques that both serve the litigation's interest and their client's interest. Okay. So, any other questions? All right. Another challenge in this process is encryption, right? We deal with encryption very regularly. Matter of fact, when we deliver data, we encrypt it. Okay, there are lots of different ways that we can do that. But what do we do when we encounter a great deal of encrypted information? Perhaps the person who created the password is no longer at the organization, but we know that they were a researcher involved in this project and they had a lot of critical information, perhaps locked in those archives or those encrypted files. Well, the first thing we do is we log the presence of anything that's encrypted. Our collection methods and our indexing approaches and our searching approaches should identify, and any approach should identify anything that's potentially encrypted. So at the very least, you can report to the people you're doing this for that you found encrypted information. These are the locations of this data, and this is what the data is called, right? So hopefully they can make a relevancy call just based on that alone. Now, if they can't make a relevancy call, then you'll need to exert some effort to either crack the password or hopefully the client decides that they don't need it. Cracking passwords is kind of a hit or miss depending on the encryption level used, and it just may not be worth a weeks-long brute force approach to get at one file that, in the grand scheme of things, probably not worth the effort. Another big challenge, language, right? We live in a global, and we participate in a global economy. A lot of the entities that we do business with folks in other time zones, speak other languages. They have offices in different countries. Does our approach at gathering data or finding data need to take this into account? Do our tools identify languages in the data set so we know how to structure our searches? Okay. Just here on the screen is just the phrase, find what you're looking for, and it's in many different languages, and you'll see at the bottom we have Unicode, right? Unicode or double byte characters, or we call them CJK characters in the discovery field. We need to take this into account because not every application deals with Unicode very well, and we need to know what technology those business units were using, and to make sure we employ technology that can account for that, either before or after the collection effort. Okay, typically after the collection effort with Unicode search. So you'll see right underneath Unicode we have traditional Chinese. Right above that we've got Hebrew from right to left, and then we've got two different versions of Japanese. Okay, both saying the same thing. Again, right to left versus left to right, and then even with traditional Chinese you have top to bottom or right to left. So all this needs to be kept in mind when we're dealing with international organizations and trying to find information that might be non-English or even Unicode. Another big issue, lots of nonprofits are going to the cloud, right? They're using Gmail. Lots of corporations are starting to use Microsoft Office 365. They don't want to pay for Microsoft Office every time they hire a new person. Just go to the URL and use Office, use PowerPoint, use Excel, and in many cases, store the data in the cloud. Right? This presents some interesting challenges to us collections and analysis and search folks. Right? Because how do we search a disk that we don't have access to? Right? All we're seeing are the files in the file system. Right? So that this creates some interesting challenges, and it's really a conversation that needs to be had. In many instances, if someone's using Google Mail, You can set up a mail client and pull the mail into what we regularly deal with on Microsoft PST files and things like that. But it's a particular challenge when the data is remote to be used. Okay. So, and a lot of this information is gleaned from just interviewing these potential custodians, talking to the business units, speaking with the legal team, and understanding how documents are being shared, communicated, and created. So, identifying any potential cloud utilities or cloud apps, and take that into consideration when we're doing our collection or research. This is the bane of our tech processing team's existence. All right? Time zones. It seems like it's really simple, but this is a very complex issue. Okay? Because what happens when someone files a complaint is they'll identify or potentially identify a date range. Right? What date range are they talking about? In Australia, it's tomorrow. Okay? If it's an international organization, we need to take that into account. Or even does the entity have offices on the West Coast or Central Time? Just last week, we had an issue where a complaint specifically asked for a very tight time frame of email. However, the business unit had an East Coast component and a Pacific time zone component. Okay? The in-house tech team at the law firm processed or extracted the metadata with an Eastern time zone. We process data with GMT, right, to attempt to flatten everything out and maintain relationships or the timelines between when one email is sent and another email is sent. Because we used GMT, they had a set of emails that they did not initially intend or believe were going to be part of time frame of interest. Those emails, they didn't like. Okay, so this sparked the conversation. So consulting folks like us, data processing folks, we tend to flatten everything out to GMT. It's a conversation that needs to be had, or another factor that we need to consider when we're talking about data search and time frames and particular tight time frames. We tend to widen the net a little bit and use some post-collection tools to really hone in on the dates of interest.
On the civil side, how much does the overseas identity protection laws affect the data that you can collect?
Yeah, it's a great question. Dennis is asking, how do the overseas data protection laws come into play? There are things like the EU Safe Harbor, which is kind of you self-certify for that, and we are certified for that. But essentially, the EU Safe Harbor doesn't really keep me from doing anything, but the EU laws are very different from here. We're here, anything that we create on a corporation's computer is their property. I'm sure most people are hired, they sign something that says that. The EU, that's not the case. Okay? They make, really the law is driven towards more personal privacy than the rights of a corporation. So we do have to be very careful when getting data from overseas, and even country by country, the laws vary. So today, if someone calls and say, hey, can you go to Germany, and if we have an office in Germany, we need to collect data from a business unit that consists of 20 people, and we have a year of data that we're interested in going after, that's a very different process. We can't just go in there and do that. Very often you need an entity that's familiar with the laws that pertain to that exact country to understand what you can and cannot do. But here in the States, that's really not the case. Someone can have an office in California. Their IT person's made an image of a workstation and archived it. They'll just ship us the archive. They own the data. Whereas in the EU, the laws are very different. So we can't just go trolling around an office and taking images of everybody's workstation. We just can't do that. So, good question. Now, again, with dates and time zones, what we try to do is normalize the dates and that's just by applying a date across the board, okay, or a time zone across the board. And the one we typically use is Greenwich Mean Time or GMT, right? That allows us to keep the relationship between the emails. If you were to line them up on chronology intact, you can see that someone on the West Coast, yes?
Just a note there, you have to be careful, which I'm sure you imply, but there's a danger that machines in the conversation won't have synchronized timestamps.
Yes.
So 9 a.m. a message may originate normalized to
Yes.
GMT may originate at 9:03 from one place and be received at 8:47,
Right.
and
Yeah,
you have
the-
to have that discussion with counsel.
Correct. The point is, the time of the email file or the metadata on the record is really driven by the system that created it, or the server that's on, or even the workstation that sent the email. If that time is incorrect, there's not a whole lot you can do about that, right? If someone's in the Pacific time zone and they've just moved there from the East Coast and they forgot to change their computer to East Coast time, then you're relying on the mail server to make that correction, right? So just be very careful with dates and times and relying to the moment in terms of making an argument or a decision on the reliability of time.